Hi, this is Charlie. I'm going to give you some guidelines for doing the daytime boat tour of the Bradenton Beach area. I am a tour guide in St. Louis along with my partner Barry. We worked on writing up, basically we want to give you some of the main interesting facts, good things to cover on the tour. We're going to kind of organize it into groups. I want you guys to make it your own. In other words, impart your own personality. Barry and I took the same types of facts and everything that I'm going to be giving you, and we made it our own. We used our own personality. We do trolley tours in St. Louis that are about an hour and a half long, about the same length as this. And we imparted our own personality, so each tour now is very different from the other one, but we both are very highly rated on all of the TripAdvisor type websites, very successful up here. I want you to have the same success down there. Use your own personality. Do what makes you comfortable. We want lots of smiles. We want, really the biggest thing to impart is that you love giving the tour and that you love the area you're giving the tour in. If you can convey that to the people on board, you're all going to have a good time, all of you. And that will also really help in the tip department. You make sure you answer their questions. Don't be afraid to say you don't know the answer to a question. You won't know them all, but of course, usually you can at least give some information that helps answer their question if you don't know the exact fact. And of course, you'll get questions over and over again. You'll learn what you need to look up, what questions that we didn't think of and that you didn't think of that might be important in giving the tour. And this is not going to be an hour and a half's worth of information. It is a boat tour. And the thing different about that, other than the tours we do up here, is you're dealing with wildlife. And when a dolphin shows up, dolphin is most important. And that's what the captain needs to know. That's what you as the tour guide needs to know, is that everyone on board wants to see a manatee. They want to see a dolphin. And no matter where you're at in the tour, the dolphin is the star of the show. The manatee is the star of the show. So work around the wildlife. As far as the birds that you see and where you see them, that will be unpredictable. So all of this we give you is basically to fill up the time at a casual pace. You don't have to talk every second. People don't pay to hear you talk every second on the tour. They want a relaxing boat ride. That's what they're there for. If it starts to feel like it's too uncomfortable of a long of a gap, then fill it in and be comfortable and let people interact with you. And each group is going to be different depending on whether it's mostly elderly people or lots of children. And you're going to have both on this particular tour, and you'll learn how to accommodate all of them. Probably most of these is going to be a mixture of all of that. So I'll go through the tour as is right now, and of course we want you to work with the captains as well to interact and let them add their 2 cents in on those things. And so that chemistry you'll need to learn with the people that you're working with. But this is a good guideline, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, as people are coming aboard, I like to ask where they're from. That almost always sparks some conversation. Where you're located there, you're going to have international guests, people from right down the street, and people from all over the United States. So it's usually fun to learn where people are from, and that's a good icebreaker. And as far as the tour, when everybody's loaded aboard safely before you leave the dock, I would say something like, "Hello and welcome to Fun and Sun Boat Tours. My name is Tami. I have lived and loved the Gulf Coast of Florida my entire life. And this is our master captain. Everybody say hello to Captain Sherman." I said say hello to Captain Sherman. You want to pump them up a little bit if need be. Of course, it depends on the group. If you've only got 2 people, you'll look like an idiot saying that. So you'll feel it out for yourself. The Gulf Coast, especially the Bradenton Beach area, is rich in history and wildlife, and we are going to share as much of that as possible on today's voyage. First, I'm going to hand it off to Captain Sherman for a bit of safety. So the captain will go through the safety routine necessary. He can probably add his own humor. But one thing that I like to add that really works well on the trolley tour up here is, okay, and for insurance purposes, I do need to count you all. Folks, I am responsible to make sure I get at least 80% of you back safely today. That always gets a laugh. People really get a kick out of that. And so away we go, and the tour begins. Okay, as we leave the pier, it's good to talk about the pier itself and say that it was originally part of a wooden drawbridge built in 1923 to connect Anna Maria Island, where we're just leaving from, to the mainland of Bradenton. The bridge was a wood plank and very narrow, and the drawbridge portion was also very small. It wasn't uncommon for larger boats to get stuck in the drawbridge, which is exactly what happened to John Ringling's yacht several times. You've heard of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's Circus. Well, of course, in Sarasota, there is a museum, the John Ringling Museum. Very, very interesting attraction, definitely worth seeing. Now, this bridge was replaced back in 1957 by a much larger drawbridge. You can see right over there. When the new drawbridge was built, the original island side of the bridge was kept and turned into this fishing pier. This pier was severely damaged in a hurricane back in 2004 and needed over $2 million in renovations. It received relatively minor damage in a storm last year, and repairs were just recently completed. There are some wonderful views here from the pier. Fishing is very good. I've seen lots of big fish caught here. They even have weddings down at the pavilion at the end of the pier. And the clock tower is a favorite local landmark and a great place to reference for directions. Now, I know some of you won't be familiar with the drawbridge idea. They were designed to allow the passage of large boats and ships. Traffic is stopped and the roadway is raised to allow the passage of a boat. This greatly shortened the distance boats had to travel getting to and from open water. On the other hand, it slowed vehicle traffic. This didn't used to be a big problem, but as traffic volume has increased, it's become a much larger problem. Now most bridges in the area are built high enough that boats can pass under them without needing a drawbridge. Right now we are in the Intracoastal Waterway. No doubt you've probably seen signs that say ICW, and that stands for Intracoastal Waterway. It is a system of waterways allowing boating and navigation in protected waters rather than the more dangerous open water of the Gulf. Not only around the peninsula of Florida, but all the way around the Gulf to Texas and well up the East Coast. This system of bays, sounds, rivers, and canals offers protected waterways for boat travel, fishing, and recreation. Right now we are in Sarasota Bay, but as we cross under the Cortez Bridge, we will be entering the Palmasola Bay. Of course, on the tour today, it's very likely we'll see some dolphins. Between the Sarasota Bay and the Palmasola Bay, we have over 200 dolphins living in the area, their entire lives, as a matter of fact. Dolphins are mammals. These dolphins are known as bottlenose dolphins in this area. They have everything they need here to live their entire life. There's a lot of shallow water. In fact, on the tour today, about 75% of the time we'll be in water less than 10 feet deep. And that makes for lots of weed beds, lots of vegetation, which makes for smaller critters, which makes for fish, which is the main diet of the dolphin. And this area is so rich in all of that that the dolphins can live here their entire lives, which can be a pretty long time. In fact, there's a very serious dolphin study that's been going on for over 40 years from the Moat Aquarium down there on Longboat Key. And the oldest known dolphin in Sarasota Bay is named Niccolo, and he is 63 years old. Very old for a dolphin. Now, the main predator of the dolphin is, in this area, the bull shark, which gets from 6 to 8 feet in length, and they are a classic shark-looking shark like you would see in Jaws, even though that was a great white. These are similar to that. In fact, there's about 200 dolphins living in this area their entire lives, and about a third of those dolphins, or about 60 of those dolphins, have very visible scars from encounters that they survived with bull sharks. So it's not all fish and fun here in the bay. The dolphins have to really watch out. And as I said, dolphins are mammals. The babies stay with the moms from 3 to 6 years of age, and then they go off on their own. And soon gather and have their own families. Mammals are sexually mature, somewhere between 5 to 15 years of age. They can swim up to 35 miles an hour, and they love to play around boats. They're very agile. They're not really fearful of man. You won't see dolphins getting hit by boats. They know to stay out of the way. They know how to stay out of the way of fishing line, things like that. But they do like to play sometimes right in front of the boat, and hopefully we'll see some and get some opportunities, as dolphins do have to come up to get air. They are mammals. It's just a matter of how much activity they're in, how often they come up. The entire time we're on the boat tour today, we are actually in Manatee County. It's another one of our very famous mammals here in Florida, the Florida manatee. It is an actual subspecies of the West Indian manatee, and it is an endangered species here in Florida. There's about 3,000 manatees remaining within the waters of the state of Florida, and they rely on both salt and fresh water to survive. They swim from one to the other. They get to be up to 15 feet long and up to 3,500 pounds. They feed on seagrasses, which, as I've said, there's lots of shallow water here in these two bays. So the chances of seeing a manatee vary greatly depending on the time of year. The warmer the water, the more there will be manatees here in this area. In fact, the threshold for low temperature for manatees is about 68 degrees. Usually, in decades past, the manatees would need to travel south from this area whenever the water got below that temperature. But because of man's influence, that has changed. The manatee has learned about the power plants here in Florida, and there's several running up and down the coast. Well, as these power plants generate power, they need water to cool their turbines. That water is then released at up to 100 degrees in temperature at a constant rate, so the manatees swim to those power plant water release areas, and that is usually also an area with lots of vegetation because of the warm water, so they can have plenty of food, plenty of warm water. So it's like the manatees get to go on vacation. Now, the only potential problem is, what if the power plant stops generating power? Well, the state of Florida has taken care of that. They have made sure that power plants remain operating during those winter months at a constant rate to make sure that we don't endanger the manatees any farther than they have been already. Of course, the biggest threat to manatees is mankind and the boats that they run. Being hit by the keels of boats, by the props of boats, kill more manatees here in Florida than anything else. Second is actually cold snaps, cold spells, where it catches the manatee off guard and can kill the manatee. Now, manatees can live up to 50 years. They are born mostly in the summertime. The gestation period is 1 year, and most female manatees have a baby every 2 to 5 years. Now, they eat up to 100 pounds of vegetation per day. They can eat anything from mangroves to a variety of over 100 seagrasses. Now, the calves stay with the mom for about 2 years, and a lot of times on the tour we will see a calf and mother together, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to see that today. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know what a mermaid is. Well, My Little Mermaid, the movie Splash, of course, always known as beautiful creatures with usually long, flowing blonde hair, long, shapely bodies, and a beautiful fin. Well, the fact of the matter is, and this is a fact, that sailors at sea for a long, long time would see the manatees and describe them to people as mermaids. Beautiful mermaids in the water, swimming around, splashing, teasing the sailors. Well, let me ask the gentleman on board today, how long would you have to be at sea for this to begin to look like this? And I would suggest having photos of both either a My Little Mermaid or a Splash, something like that picture, and then a picture of a manatee. I'm sure you'll get some laughs, basically, with that comparison. Okay, and now we're going to get to the area that I will affectionately call Millionaire's Row. It's where we go into the canal looking at the beautiful big houses. And so I would say something like, and now we are entering what we call Millionaire's Row. It is actually a gated community known as Harbor Landings in Cortez, which is a historic commercial fishing village of about 5,000 people. These homes sell for $1 to $3 million, and they have association fees ranging from between $500 and $1,000 per month. Now, it's a fun area for people to look through, but there's not a whole lot to say about the houses themselves. So what I would mention in this particular area is that there are several sports celebrities living in this area. We don't identify particular celebrities with particular homes, but it is the case. And this area of Cortez is the area that can be developed, but there is another side, and basically a fun activity for people that are visiting the area, Cortez itself. And make sure you either point this area out at the beginning of the tour or at the end of the tour where we can actually see the Cortez fishing village from the fishing pier. So, what to talk about at Cortez? Say it is a historic commercial fishing village. It's the only commercial fishing village left on the Gulf Coast of Florida. It was settled in the 1880s by a bunch of folks from North Carolina that were living as commercial fishermen on the Outer Banks area. They had been pummeled year after year by tropical storms and hurricanes. They wanted to escape that, and they thought that they didn't want to lose their way of life of commercial fishing, so they came to the Gulf side and settled basically in another island area very similar to that of North Carolina that would be much more protected by storms. And that did overall work out for them very well. So these commercial fishermen settled here in the 1880s. They would tie their own nets together, use small wooden boats, and their fish of choice was mullet. They would catch mullet, which is a bait fish for fishing, for redfish, speckled trout. Even the dolphins eat mullet, and these fishermen would smoke the mullet and sell them, and also eat them for themselves. There's a huge fishing festival in February in the town of Cortez that attracts people from all around the world. Now, one interesting thing is that it is the only community in the United States that did not receive federal aid during the Great Depression. The folks refused the aid. They said they would live just fine off their fish. And that's a point of pride to this day, as there was only 6 family surnames that started in Cortez. Now, in Cortez, basically you will still find a very quaint fishing village. There is a nature preserve, and that is where the Florida Maritime Museum is located. It has a lot of interesting history about the area, and of course it is a great place to get a very fresh seafood meal. You don't have to get dressed up to go to Cortez. It is a working town. It is still a commercial fishing town, but it has a lot of character, a lot of charm. As a matter of fact, there's been lots of interest in Hollywood in the town of Cortez. There have been 4 movies filmed in the Cortez area: Great Expectations, starring Gwyneth Paltrow; Out of Time, starring Denzel Washington; and Palmetto, starring Woody Harrelson. Also, I'm sure all of you remember The Perfect Storm. Several scenes in that movie were filmed in the Cortez area, as well as off the coast of the Bradenton Beach area as well. Now, Cortez is also considered an artist community. Artists from all over the world settle in Cortez. It acts as a background to inspire them for whatever type of art they want to pursue. Now, the way of life in all of Florida, but especially a town like Cortez, was the net ban in 1995, which banned the types of nets used by these commercial fishermen because, especially with larger vessels, unfortunately, particularly not the ones used here in Cortez, but it was a nationwide ban against the nets because they were damaging the ecosystem by killing lots of other critters other than the mullet that were being caught by them. So with that net ban, a lot of the commercial fishermen here turned to shrimping or simply a completely other way of life. So commercial fishing is still a major industry for Cortez, but it is nothing like the way it used to be, and that's why it's the only commercial fishing village left on the entire Gulf Coast of Florida. Okay, now we have to talk about hurricanes. Everybody is interested in hurricanes and how they've damaged or not damaged the area. So, primarily you can tell them that overall this area has not been too badly affected by hurricanes like so much of the state of Florida has, but we have had a few. Now, back in 1921 is the major one, which was called the Monster. You see, back in the early 1900s, they didn't have a naming system for hurricanes and tropical storms yet, but this one was so major that it got the nickname the Monster, and it stuck. It had sustained winds of 115 miles an hour. It was a Category 3 hurricane when it did hit shore back on October the 25th of 1921, and it basically destroyed the entire area with an 11-foot storm surge. The island that we left from to conduct the tour today was completely underwater by the storm surge, and the community here of Cortez was basically completely destroyed. The only building left standing was the general store and hotel, which is now where the Coast Guard building is located. 8 people died as a result of the hurricane. There have been some since, but none nearly as devastating as the hurricane here in 1921. Actually, there wasn't much damage on the island of Anna Maria Island itself due to the fact that there wasn't much of a community there yet. There were a couple vacation homes. That was about it. The area became settled as a permanent residence area after that hurricane in 1921. Now we're going to talk about the mangroves. Now, one good spot is on Millionaire's Row. We actually circle around an area of mangroves, and of course later on in the tour there's a whole other section of mangroves. So I'll give you some facts about that. The mangrove trees that you see along the bay areas are one of Florida's most critical ecosystems. There are 3 main types of mangrove: red, black, and white, and most of the trees you will see today are red mangroves, and they are easy to identify by their interesting root systems that are called prop roots. This tree is often called the walking tree because of the way the roots look like legs taking a step into the water. You may notice the large string bean-like tubes floating near the trees. These are how the trees reproduce. These seeds can be spread long distances and remain viable for long periods of time until they find the right conditions to sprout a new tree. The mangroves are important for many reasons. They provide stability to the land and prevent erosion in storms, actually slowly forming new land areas. The roots provide important shelter and food for small fish and crustaceans, which in turn provide food for larger fish and birds. 90% of Florida's fish rely on this system to thrive. The branches of the trees provide critical roosting rookery areas for many of our birds, including pelicans, egrets, herons, spoonbills, etc. Okay, we want to mention some birds because obviously on almost every tour we'll see lots of birds. One of the real attractions in Florida for many people is the fascinating variety of birds that you will find here. They are very different in size, habits, coloring, and every other way you can imagine. One of the most popular birds in this area is the pelican. The brown pelicans are here year-round, and in the winter we are visited by the somewhat larger white pelican. These birds may look awkward when they walk, but in the air they are the very image of grace and beauty. You will see them gliding effortlessly just inches above the water. A group of pelicans is called a squadron. When they feed, they dive bomb the water to stun small fish and then scoop them up and filter them with their huge pouch. You will also see anhinga, cormorants, egrets of many types, heron, spoonbills, and many other varieties, and we will point out a few on the trip. The cormorant and the anhinga are very similar. The easiest way to tell them apart is by their bill or beak. The anhinga's is pointed while the cormorant's is hooked. The anhinga is often called the snake bird, because it swims only with its head and long neck out of the water, looking like a snake about to strike. You will see them with their wings spread, sitting on branches, drying their feathers. These birds do not have the oil glands most birds have to waterproof their feathers. This allows them to dive quite deep and stay underwater for quite a while. But there is a price to pay. They have to come out and dry their feathers before they can fly. The reddish egret is quite unique. It is a very pretty bird with gray coloring with dark and maroon highlights. It puts on a very unusual performance. You will see them walking in shallow water and tide pools, obviously intent on searching for food. Suddenly they will break into what looks like a rain dance. After a few seconds, they will spread their wings and freeze in position. This is actually a very ingenious feeding technique. The dance stirs up the water and forces small fish and animals out of their hiding places. The birds then spread their wings and freeze, to fool the fish into thinking that the shade represents shelter, and as they gather in the shade of its wings, the bird has an easy meal. It's pretty clever. Okay, and let's talk a little bit about shells. One of most people's favorite activities at the beach is shell collecting. I would suggest getting one of these laminated sheets showing you the various most common shells in the area. We have some examples here to show you. One of the most common people hear about first is the conch shell, most commonly referred to as the fighting conch. And let me give you a quick tip right now. You will give yourself away as a tourist right away if you say conch, like it is spelled. Forget the spelling. It is pronounced as if it were spelled K-O-N-K. And if you like clam chowder, try the conch chowder. You can point out several different various shells on the tour that you have with you. And another fun one is this. How many of you are left-handed? About 10% of the population is left-handed. But in the shell world, the percentage is much smaller. You probably never thought of a shell as right or left-handed, but they are. If you hold them up with a small end down, either your right hand or left hand will naturally go into the opening of the shell. The whelk shell is one of the very few left-handed shells in the world, and it can be found right here at Bradenton Beach. Okay, and we got to talk about the beaches. Florida's beaches are among the most beautiful in the world, many being named annually in the top 10. There are many types of beaches, including sandy and rocky, and most of the beaches that you will see are the sandy type, but there are also many types of sand. The whitest sands are nearly pure quartz, yellow sand has some mainly crushed shells, and dark coarse sand grains are often fossilized animal bone and teeth. The white sands that you see here locally are very small grains of quartz washed down from the Appalachian Mountains about 20 million years ago. Now, another thing I'd like you to mention on the tour is some of the local favorite Florida foods. Right off the top, I can think of key lime pie. You can explain some of that. And about some of the seafoods that they should definitely enjoy locally while they're in town. The other part of that is some of the local attractions. I'm sure some of you will have some of your own local favorites that you should definitely mention. Go ahead and like I said, make the tour your own. Of course, the Ringling Museum is a good one. Moat Aquarium is a good one. You can mention all the different water sports that people can enjoy, the parasailing, the scuba diving, things like that. And I do have a little story about the scuba diving here in just a minute. And so next we will talk about the Gulf of Mexico itself. And of course you'd point this out using your hands a lot during the tour. On the west side of the beaches extends the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf is a fascinating and unique body of water covering about 600,000 square miles. The longest point is 1,000 miles east to west, and the shortest point is 500 miles north to south. There are over 4,000 miles of shoreline along the Gulf, and the Gulf is mainly shallow continental shelf. So most people think of the Gulf as being completely shallow, but that's definitely not the case. It can get quite deep. One portion, 300 miles long, is over 12,000 feet deep and is known as the Grand Canyon under the sea. 60% of the U.S. mainland drains into the Gulf. Rising sea levels all along the Gulf coastal areas are threatening some of our ecosystems. Of course, the Gulf Stream, one of the ocean's strongest currents, originates right here. It is responsible for the moderation of temperatures along the east coast and for the temperate climate of Western Europe. Most of Western Europe would be a much colder environment if the weather was based only on its latitude. The Gulf is home to many animal species, whales, and over 40 varieties of sharks. There are over 750 known shipwrecks in the Gulf, and the Bradenton Beach area has a couple of its own, making for some great scuba diving right off the coast of Bradenton Beach. In fact, there is a shipwreck right off the coast of Bradenton Beach. When you leave the tour today, walk down the city pier. You could walk straight down Bridge Street through the square over to the beach, and about a half a mile offshore is the wreck of the Regina. It's a molasses barge that wrecked in 1940, a huge boat over 300 feet long that left from Cuba on its way to New Orleans and was caught in a huge storm and shipwrecked right off the coast. It has created its own natural coral reef and is a great diving spot. People come from all over the world to dive the wreck of the Regina, and it is one of 13 Florida underwater archaeological preserves. We have another shipwreck that is a archaeological underwater preserve for the state of Florida. It's just off of the tip of Edgemont Key. It was an 1866 wreck, a Civil War tugboat, a key tugboat in the Battle of Mobile, Alabama, on August the 5th of 1864. And it is in only 15 feet of water and a very popular site for scuba diving. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about Anna Maria Island, where the tour left from. It is 7 miles long, and it was actually named by Ponce de Leon, the Spanish explorer that was searching for the Fountain of Youth. He named it Anna Maria Island to honor the Virgin Mary and her mother, Anne. There's 3 communities on Anna Maria Island. The southernmost, Bradenton Beach, where we left from today for the tour. And just north of that is Holmes Beach. And then at the very northern tip of the island is Anna Maria. It's really considered old world Florida, the old charming little community, the original beach community. Very laid back, great place to get a meal. You can stroll along the fishing piers up on Anna Maria Island. Great place that you never really have to leave on the island. No fast food restaurants found there, no high-rises. As a matter of fact, there's only one high-rise, and that's in the Bradenton Beach area. And after building that 7-story high-rise, they decided, we don't want any high-rises here on the island. So they were banned after that to keep the island with its old world charm. And Anna Maria Island has a very famous creation. Fig Newton was invented on Anna Maria Island, one of my favorites. Bradenton Beach itself was incorporated in 1952, by the way. Okay, and we wouldn't be complete on a boat tour of the Gulf Coast of Florida without talking about pirates. And so today we'll talk about the most famous pirate to ever sail these waters. His name was Jose Gaspar, better known as Gasparilla. And he was actually from Spain. He was a Spanish naval officer that sailed these waters between the late 1700s and 1821. He was credited for capturing over 400 ships. He buried treasure all throughout these islands. Makes for some very interesting stories. He was the most feared pirate in all of the Gulf Coast of Florida. He had a secret hideout near Port Charlotte, which is about 70 miles south of here, and he would continuously sail up to the Tampa Bay area where boats were coming in and out, trading their goods, filled sometimes to the brim with coins and sugar and medicines, all the things that pirates like to capture. Now, Gasparilla was quite cunning in the way he pirated. You see, a lot of would-be pirates tried their hand of pirating in the Tampa Bay area, but weren't very successful. They would always be captured. But for all those years, Gasparilla avoided capture by being a little smarter. You see, there was more islands in this area back then than there were today. Some of those islands have been destroyed by tropical storms and hurricanes and the like. But some of these islands have also been rearranged in that time period. Well, they provided good hiding places for pirates, for the most part. There's a problem, though. The big sailing ships, the pirate ships, had huge masts, very tall masts. So when a boat tried to hide behind an island, the authorities could see that ship from the other side of the island by the mast. Well, Gasparilla, he outsmarted them all. You see, he used palm trees, tied them to the top of his mast to disguise him, or in other words, camouflage his boat as just part of the island scenery. Now, Gasparilla was so successful, he never got caught, and he finally decided to retire all on his own. He had plenty of treasure buried all over this area, so when he retired, he divided the loot up among his shipmates, and on that day, here came a big ship. It looked like a true prize from Great Britain. It was a merchant ship. They decided, one last take. So they sailed out to meet the ship. It turned out to be the USS Enterprise, built to destroy pirate ships, and the attack ensued. The Enterprise pummeled Gasparilla's ship with cannonballs. It began to sink, and Gasparilla wrapped himself in the chains of his anchor, threw himself overboard while shouting, "Gasparilla dies by his own hand, not the enemy's." And that was the last of Gasparilla. Now this has all led to the huge Gasparilla Pirate Festival in Tampa Bay, Florida, held each year in late January or early February, and it's hosted by the Ye Mystic crew of Gasparilla. And it celebrates the Spanish pirate captain who operated in southwest Florida for many years. The focal point of Gasparilla is an invasion by Jose Gaspar and his crew of the town of Tampa Bay by sailing into Tampa Bay. There's a huge flotilla, including a 165-foot-long pirate ship, which was specially built for this purpose in 1954. And when the flotilla comes to town, the mayor of Tampa hands over the keys of the city to the pirate captain, and a victory parade ensues down Bayshore Boulevard. It's basically Tampa Bay's version of Mardi Gras. There's huge floats throwing out beads. It's a huge celebration, very successful. Over 1 million people at times attend the Gasparilla Parade. Now, of course, we've talked about all this treasure. If you want to pick up a metal detector, there's a good chance you can find some dimes, some pennies, maybe someone's left ring, and a small chance you could even find a treasure of your own. And keep in mind, the state of Florida has its own treasure trove law. If you find that big treasure, something worth over $1,000, Florida is entitled to 25%. Okay, so that's the facts I have for the tour. Be sure to give the folks a friendly thank you and a friendly goodbye. That's where the tips come in. Be prepared to give some extra information. Where's a good place to eat? What time do they close? What time do they open? If it's a family on a budget or something for a romantic for a couple. And, try to keep them in the Bradenton Beach area on Anna Maria Island. And also the Cortez area, just in the local area there. And if they need information about Sarasota, of course, give that up willingly. You can talk about some of the great beaches in the area and which ones you suggest for different areas, of course, as well. Okay, there's also a couple jokes that might come up that they're all kind of corny, but people like corny. Why do seagulls fly over the sea? Because if they flew over the bay, they'd be bagels. How much did the pirate pay for his piercings? Buccaneer. Some other people might ask you, are there any alligators or crocodiles here? And your response should be, oh, no, the sharks ate them all. And what lies at the bottom of the ocean and twitches? A nervous wreck. So those are some that you can incorporate in the tour. Have fun with the tour. That's the most important thing. And Tami will take care of a bunch of your questions other than that. Thanks a lot.